Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joining my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
Division number 2 in our division preview week and a half, whatever you'd like to call it. We're going right through these divisions, rolling through. The American League West, here's a fact. The World Series champion has come from the AL West 11 times in its history. It was formed in 1969 with 6 inaugural members: Angels, White Sox, Royals, Twins, A's, and the Seattle Pilots. So it looks a little different nowadays. The A's have the most world championships out of the teams from this division with 4, although the last one was all the way back in 1989. So American League West, man, this is a fun one. I mean, I think I'm going to be saying that a lot. As I looked through these divisions, there's a lot to like about the division races and the competition in each division. Whereas I feel like in years past, there's been a few divisions that are just a little bit like throwaways, like, you know who's going to win that one. None of them are that good. This year, I don't know, man. It's a lot different. I like what I see out of the 6 divisions and how competitive they may be.
So, for nearly a decade, the American League West has been the Houston Astros division to lose. We've seen them go on a run here since 2017. The Astros have won 7 of the last 8 AL West championships, with the lone exception being, of course, the 2023 year when the Texas Rangers surged to their first ever World Series championship. And despite that Cinderella run from them, Houston then reclaimed its atop the spot in 2024 after all the stuff we continue to bury them on the show. It wasn't a dominant campaign. We saw them sputtering to the finish line. And their grip on the division has loosened a little bit in recent years, Devin, thanks to some key departures, an aging core, and the resurgence of the teams that we're going to be talking about today. The Seattle Mariners that we will discuss to remain consistent in the playoff mix, but have yet to take that final step. Did they do enough in the offseason to make people pick them? And of course, the Rangers look to regain that form from 2023. The injuries derailed their title defense in 2024. And the stories out there with the Athletics and the Angels, on the other hand, continue to rebuild. The Athletics had a lot of promise last year. We'll talk about the re-signings of Rooker and Butler, and sending some money on Severino and spending a lot of good stuff here. It is interesting. You mentioned before, there's a lot of good storylines here to talk about. And I think the biggest one is, are we seeing the death of the Astros dominance over this division? Are we ready to bury them and ready to scratch in the epitaph of a start date and an end date for this dominance that we've seen since 2017?
Well, let's start with them. All right, so we'll start with them. This is the team that I declared dead way too early last year, as did many people. And I even felt like I was waiting. Like, I felt like I was being responsible last year, and it still turned out to be way too early. There at one point, we're 10 games back of the Seattle Mariners at the time, and obviously things changed. But yeah, to go to the Houston Astros here, you mentioned the names that are no longer there. Kyle Tucker, Alex Bregman. Those are 2 pretty damn big guys to lose. I think heading towards the offseason, a lot of Astros fans, if they were being honest, it still had some hope for Bregman coming back, but kind of saw him maybe leaving. The Kyle Tucker thing was a direct result of Juan Soto's contract. I don't think there was any intent on the Astros' part when the offseason began to get rid of Kyle Tucker. But when they saw that deal, and they thought Kyle Tucker is one of the closest guys to Soto in what he can do offensively, I think they made the right move, knowing they wouldn't be able to be in that race financially for a Tucker on the open market. Here's my thing with them. That is the obvious weakness of this team. The offense, more than likely, will not be what it has been in the past. You still have Jose Altuve there. I don't love the move to left field. I understood that conversation when the Bregman thing came back around, and Bregman still was unsigned after a long time, and they're like, oh, he actually might come back here, and if he does, Altuve will move to left field. Okay, I get it at that point, because you got Paredes at third now, so that spot's gone. Got it. Bregman didn't re-sign with the Astros. I don't love it. I don't love putting Altuve out there, messing with a guy who's just been so consistent over the years, but we'll see. Yordan Alvarez is an absolute monster. It might be my favorite hitter in the league. We wonder, he made that comment about his knee and almost getting surgery. You don't like to hear that, but if he's out there, I guess he's healthy, and he's an unbelievable hitter. Just all around, can do everything, not affected by seemingly any split that you can find out there. So you got to love those guys that are going to lead your offense. The Christian Walker acquisition, sure, I like it. Already dealing with some oblique stuff. You dealt with it last year. You don't love to see it. Not a younger dude. Love the player. You hope he's going to be healthy in his first year in Houston. Jeremy Pena is an interesting guy. To me, after all the postseason heroics a couple years ago as a rookie, he has come off as a very average player since then. With that being said, he's been an absolute monster in spring training. So maybe he has found something to take a step forward. The whole point of this, I'm not going to go through every piece of the lineup. I already named a few. I think this year, the pitching is going to have to lead the way. And you do have some returning arms, some arms that you're hopeful that take the next step. So Framber Valdez is still there. I thought there was a little bit of a chance that they'd move him. He's going into his last year as an Astro, unless they choose to extend him. He is similar to in the NL West episode we just recorded before this one. We mentioned Logan Webb being a guy that's just so dependable on going out there and giving you tons of innings. Framber Valdez is one of the only other guys I feel the same way about. So he's going to lead the way. Ronel Blanco was quite a finding last year. Another guy that was kind of a career reliever, kind of back and forth, AAA bus, that kind of guy, was unreal. So we'll see if he can do that again, or if the league has a little more of a book on him as a starter now. Hunter Brown had a rough start and then showed signs of the pitcher we always thought he was going to be. So let's see what step he takes. Spencer Arrighetti, same guy. He'd get crushed some nights, and then other nights he'd strike out the world. So they hope he can lead the way. You have some guys that they hope can return. Luis Garcia, Hayden Wesneski was acquired in the deal that sent Tucker to the Cubs. But that's my thing, man. I don't know if this rotation is strong enough to make up for I don't want to say depleted offense, but definitely an offense that is going to most likely take a step back.
Yeah, and you mentioned the signing Christian Walker. That was to address the offensive needs at the position, and they clearly needed, and I think Walker's a good fit. But if you look at the full equation of the players that were lost, I don't think Christian Walker compensates for the loss of those players. You mentioned a shifting of the projected starters to be carrying the team, which is certainly a different dynamic that we've seen in years past from the dominant Astros, as we mentioned. Obviously the core of that is still there, the heart and soul of the Astros, Jose Altuve, but for the most part, this is not your mom and pop Astros. This is not that 2017 team anymore. They are going to be trying to remain competitive. And I think their strategy of this significant roster change has been, pretty strategic in a lot of ways. And I think that they've been smart about the way they've done things and recognizing the Kyle Tucker thing you mentioned being a direct result of Juan Soto's deal. And that definitely cannot be disputed. Kyle Tucker was not staying with the Astros, at least if the Astros were not offering similar type of money. So they moved on. And they did replace it with a pretty good deal. I mean, their number 2 hitter in the lineup, Isaac Paredes, is going to be in there. And I think there's a lot to be liked about what he's bringing to the lineup at third base. He is the direct replacement for an Alex Bregman, maybe not intended because they thought maybe when they traded for Paredes that like Bregman would still be there. Are you going to shift people around? And as you mentioned, the Bregman thing did not work out and he wound up taking the money in Boston, and we'll certainly see where it goes. But we've seen the Astros adapt. We've seen them molt into different forms of themselves, and it's the final form before we see them continue to build the ship while it's in the air. They're going to find a way to make themselves different. They'll definitely be competitive. And the interesting part about this, we'll talk about the other teams, is outside of the Rangers and what they've done in years past of signing all those players and brought in the Corey Seagers of the world and did what they did financially, you have a Seattle Mariners team that I think we could move to next here that did not do enough to take what they have rotation wise and be like, we're going to take both of our hands and strangle the life out of the Astros. They had the opportunity to do so, and they did nothing of the sort. Whereas as a Seattle fan, I don't know how you're not up in arms with markers and some poster board and rallying outside of T-Mobile and just being like, dude, we had an opportunity to not just potentially win a division this year, but get a stranglehold and be a dominant force similar to what we've seen for the past decade with the Astros. Like, that's the opportunity you have here when there is a shifting of seats. The Astros are giving up their throne a little bit here, and someone has to take it. And, it's not going to be like the NL Central. I mean, sometimes that's the same thing every year where you have a different team step up and a different team gets hot. There's an opportunity for you to be like, one goes out, we're coming in, and feels like Seattle didn't want to get their hands dirty in that way. Do you agree with that?
I do. Let me just step back, and then I'm going to step right back forward into the Mariners. Just to wrap up the Astros, I just wanted to mention I love the Paredes part, and I do think that could be. I'm kind of taking the offense down a little bit, but Paredes in that ballpark, as we've seen the spray chart, looks like it could be a great fit. I just posted before we got on here an AL West X Factor for each team, a little short video. And the one I chose for the Astros was Paredes. 19 home runs on the last year, 19 home runs on the year last season. If you go to Baseball Savant and you can see the adjusted home runs per ballpark for Houston, the Houston ballpark, that 19 goes up to 26 for Paredes. Wow. That's a crazy jump. You don't usually see that big of a jump for the adjustments. And then the bullpen's interesting. Hader back there had a little bit of a up and down year as the closer after a huge contract for them. Ryan Presley's gone now, so you don't have him as the eighth inning guy. So that's interesting. I'm going to say something similar to the Astros that I said for the Padres on the NL West episode, where on the NL West I said if the Padres are going to make more noise than we think, Fernando Tatis needs to be MVP. I think that's true for the Astros for Yordan Alvarez. If the Astros are going to continue claiming that division, Yordan Alvarez needs to be the best hitter on the planet this year, which I do think he's capable of being. Yes, I know there's a Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. Yordan Alvarez is capable of being the best hitter on the planet. I think that's what he would need to do this season for the Astros to win that division again. So to go to the Mariners, yes. This one, man, we could spend 45 minutes ranting and raving about this one. So we talked to Brady Farkas. I think it was pretty much when the offseason began. He was one of our first offseason guests. Brady Farkas, he runs a podcast called the Refuse to Lose podcast, Seattle Mariners podcast, lifetime Seattle Mariners fan. He talked about how obviously the offense wasn't good enough, but the other thing that's a little concerning is this rotation. Unlike almost any other rotation, the five guys are out there constantly. There's been a little bit of injury scares, but no major injuries. Now, you might say, why is that a bad thing, Devin? Well, it's not last year. It's just in the world we live in, the sport that we love, it doesn't happen very often. The Mariners have, I don't know if you want to say luck. Maybe they're doing something other teams are not to get their guys ready, but they have been very fortunate with how many starts their starting pitchers have given them the last few years or the last year or two. And George Kirby's already down with some shoulder issues. Doesn't sound like super major, but they already said he's going to start on the 15-day IL. That is the first thing, other than the offense not being good enough to pair with that amazing rotation. The other thing that scares me a little bit for the Mariners is, can they possibly stay that healthy in the rotation again? And if they can't, how do they make up for that? Emerson Hancock, we know, is a decent fifth starter kind of guy that's been up and down, but I wonder how they're going to make up if that does happen, even if it's just one dude that has some injury trouble this year.
And you really can't find a better 1 through 4 than Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, Luis Castillo. I mean, 1 through 4. And Emerson Hancock, like you mentioned before, being a fifth starter, their rotation is just masterful. And I think what they're doing as far as the pitch and depth, the lack of injury, that might be an effectiveness of their stability in the organization. I mean, we give a lot of discredit to the Dodgers for their pitchers getting hurt. So maybe we got to give the Mariners some credit for their pitchers staying healthy. I don't know if that is equally as challenging on their end, or if it's just a victim of coincidence kind of situation on both sides. Mm-hmm. We can have that debate over and over again. But I think one of the things that we'll continue to talk about, and I think he will definitely come up in our X Factor conversation, spoiler alert, is Julio Rodríguez and what we see from him this year, because there might be an understanding from the Mariners front office of the lack of moves can be seen as a double down of investment of, we believe Julio is more of the player he was 2 years ago than he was last year. And Julio, what we saw from him last year, there were a lot of troubling signs of maybe he's not that player. Maybe we're getting excited for no reason. And for us as fans, I think baseball's in a better place if we have Julio Rodríguez in Seattle being that player that we saw that was electrifying airwaves every single night. And I think the lack of consistency for the offense was very frustrating to watch. The lack of significant additions makes that even more frustrating and raises concerns about whether the Mariners have adequately addressed the shortcomings we saw in 2024. There is a lot to be said about Randy Arozarena. Is he the same player in Seattle that he was in Tampa? Well, certainly what we saw from him in that bulk last year doesn't seem like he is. There is a world where you can see it all coming together. Cal Raleigh batting 3, Luke Raleigh being the fifth starter, the fifth guy in the lineup, Mitch Haniger staying healthy, JP Crawford. There's a lot of talent up and down, but looking at the adjustment on my end of, you have this amazing 1 through 4 rotation to build around, and you just add 2 more pieces offensively that wouldn't be breaking the bank. They're like we were talking about before with any of these teams spending money. These offensive players, as far as boosting what we're seeing here, you could have found a way to take your 2 hands, like I said, and put it on the Astros' throat and be like, this is mine. I'm taking this AL West crown from you guys, not just for this year, but for the next 5, 6 years. And will remain to be seen. And I'm not saying I'm not picking the Mariners, because there's a lot to love about this rotation more than any other rotation in baseball. I absolutely love what Castillo, Gilbert, Miller, and Wu bring to the table, all delivering ERAs in the mid threes or better. And looking at their bullpen too, we didn't discuss that yet, but Andres Munoz and Taylor Salcedo, and go down the list of some of the other pieces here we have. I mean, Colin Snyder as well, Gregory Santos. There's a lot of really sharp arms in here that if they have a lead going into the 7th or 8th inning, the game might be over. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. They have to be able to score the runs to do that and have a lead.
Yep. Yeah, you mentioned Randy Arozarena. I think that's another kind of crutch for Jerry DiPoto of like, well, we have a full year of Randy Arozarena. We got him last year, but we have a full year, so he's kind of like an acquisition for this year. Things like that. So the interesting thing about Arozarena is people want to say, like, will he be the same guy in Seattle that he was in Tampa? He wasn't very good in Tampa before he got traded last year. If you look at the splits between when he left Tampa and he went to Seattle, not much different. So that brings you to the question of like, is he just a little diminished from what he was, say, in 2020 and 2021? He had 54 games for Seattle last year, 733 OPS, hit 231. But again, the stats were very similar in Tampa. I think he is the X factor for that offense this year. I mean, obviously Julio, who has just become this notorious slow starter, another guy you want to get off to a hot start, maybe. You got to mention, like, Justin Turner came out a few days ago now, or about a week ago, I guess, and basically said, like, he kind of wanted to be back in Seattle, and he said that rotation is like one of the best. It's just not one you'll see, like, that much talent in one rotation. And his quote was, "Are you even trying?" Like, that's how he felt about watching them from afar. Like, are you even trying? And don't forget, like, that carries some weight. This is coming from a player, a veteran player who wanted to be back there and knows how good that pitching staff is. He's questioning whether they're trying. And this is Jerry DiPoto, the same guy that said they're just trying to basically win 54% of their games. So at this point, man, like, DiPoto's got some strikes on him. So I don't know what if they miss the playoffs again. Something's gonna have to happen. New coaching staff, as far as Dan Wilson there, right? Like, they moved on last year, so that's something to be said. We'll see how that affects it as well. This team has the talent to win the division. You just wish they did more. I think the most egregious kind of punters, I will say, in this offseason were the Mariners and the Pirates, both because they have these potential great rotations, and they just decided not to try to build around that.
So before we move on from the Mariners, and we don't want to dip too deep into the prospect pool, but I think this does affect the Mariners in 2025. Colt Emerson and Lazaro Montes are both players that are projected to be arriving in 2026. So there is a world, Devin, where maybe they're looking at, let's hold still here. We're adding 2 potential franchise-altering bats into our lineup. They believe they're as advertised into their lineup in 26 without spending the money, so they have sustainability and affordability for keeping this core together without upsetting the apple cart, because there is a chance at the deadline. Like, again, if this division's wide open and they have an ability to break it open and they have 11-game lead, they're not going to choke it away like they did last year. That there's going to be rumblings on Seattle radio that they want them to trade one of these young players for a potential bat that's a difference maker in this lineup. And are they going to be willing to move away from a Colt Emerson or Lazaro Montes or a Harry Ford? Or are they going to look at this and say, we want to hold firm that these are our players for the future? And that is completely that becomes your reputation and your legacy as a front office. If you're giving up on these players that are potentially players that are going to be franchise altering. And we know prospects, we discuss it all the time on here. They don't always hit. For the most part, most of them don't hit. But there's a lot of talk about, we heard on here. You mentioned Brady Farkas. He talked about Lazaro Montes, and he quickly climbed up the rankings. He was not where he is now. He's currently number 2 in the Seattle system, but he wasn't there when we were talking with Brady, and he saw the raw talent from him. He compared him to the aforementioned Yordan Alvarez and the just athleticism, the freak swing, and the freak power. So we'll see. There's definitely going to be an allure for them to have to move on from some of these prospects in the pool. And, we discussed this with the Orioles. Like, yes, that should be advertised as something you should do, but they have to pull the right trigger because this is a team that isn't just about, any team just trying to compete. This is a team that hasn't been a division winner in how long? 01 was the last time they won the division here. So, like, we're looking at a drought that is just monumental at this point. So, there's a lot on the line here for the front office and for the Mariners at large.
Yeah, Mariners are ranked number 5 in the new farm system rankings with 7 guys in the top 100, which ties the Cubs for the most prospects in the top 100. All bats as well, which is interesting, which makes sense because you have all this young pitching. So they've been trying to build the hitting. It's just whether you wait too long. Like if it takes too long to get there and the offense doesn't meet the defense or the pitching at the right time, it doesn't work and it's all for naught. I think something that'd be really interesting is if the Mariners find themselves in the division lead at the deadline. Do they move 1 or 2 of these guys for a bat finally? People are going to be screaming for it. And don't get me wrong, like I'm sure there's a lot of Mariner fans that want to see Colt Emerson and Montez and Cole Young, these guys like in a Mariners uniform one day. But if there is a nice piece to be had and big bat and you need to move one of these guys and you have the division lead and the Astros, and then Rangers maybe aren't up to snuff, it's going to be tempting. But let's move on to that team I mentioned just now, the Rangers, Texas Rangers. A lot of moves. You mentioned the Jared Sandler episode, which was one of the most successful episodes we ever had. So that tells me Ranger fans are excited because they were tuning in. To me, the most well-rounded team in the division, the most interesting team in the division, possibly the most entertaining and watchable team in the division. So many storylines for the Texas Rangers, and a lot of them we went over in that episode. So I'll try to go quickly here. In short form, I love the offense. I think there is an argument to be made that is the best offense in the American League. I do think 1 through 9 they have that potential. I think there's question marks there, as in the bounce back candidates, the Marcus Semyons of the world, the Adolis Garcias. Do they bounce back? Jake Berger, how does he fit in? Crushes fastballs. I think that's good because they were terrible against the fastball last year. Corey Seager, one of the best players that we don't talk about enough. And part of it is because it always seems he's playing closer to 120 games than he is 160. So can we get a healthy Corey Seager here? If we do, he hit 30 home runs last year and he only played 123 games.
That's 3 straight years, by the way, of doing that. And Pacoda has him projected at 29, whatever you look at, but he's probably going to get 30 again. That's 4 straight years. You don't see that from a player. Again, you don't really hear everybody talking about him.
He is just so important to that team because he just doesn't say much, does his job. He needs to be there. 162. If you get 162 out of Corey Seager, I would bet so much on the Rangers winning this division. It's just hard to bet that he's going to do that. So yeah, the bounce back candidates are a big thing. Corey Seager's health is a big thing. And then you look at the rotation, and obviously it jumps out. Jacob deGrom changes everything for this team. Jared Sandler said it best. He said having a good rotation is one thing, but having a guy at the top, like a Jacob deGrom, it changes everything. So that's what jumps out to me. I do think it's the most well-rounded team. I think some fans were a little disappointed that they didn't double down and then add a veteran in the bullpen, which has to be their biggest question mark other than some health stuff at this point.
Yeah, and I think one of the conversations as far as weakness goes, I think everyone is excited about the Wyatt Langford next step and seeing what Seager does batting in front of him. And we mentioned Adolis Garcia is really not letting last year slip into this year. And I think that is the conversation that they have to look in the mirror and say, we're more of 2023 than we are 2024. Whatever conversation you have to have in the quiet moments of these locker room discussions of we're more of that team when we have to make sure we're clear of that. And the injury concerns. I mean, key players, including, Josh Young, I should say, struggled with injuries. I mean, go down the list. Corey Seager's done on the past. You mentioned the limited amount of games he played, despite being successful in his campaign. There was a lot to be desired as far as getting him to play at the very least 85% of his games instead of where we saw last year. But I think, the injury concerns bleed into Jacob deGrom as well, because obviously we saw him in a short burst. Everyone is excited about what we saw at the end. Everyone's excited about what we're projecting, but what we're losing sight of And we're clearly learning it right now, Devin. Like week after week, or day after day, we're hearing about injuries from all of our favorite players, like Garrett Cole, and we're seeing injuries happen as we're seeing real baseballs be thrown and moved around an infield. That's what happens here, and quickly the pie in the sky utopian view of your season can quickly crash down. And history has shown us that DeGrom may not be healthy all year. You know what I mean? Like I think we all get lost in that. I think we all could hope to get potentially, 25 starts would be amazing from a Jacob DeGrom. I would love to see something of the sort from him. And I think like you're right. If Seager and DeGrom are more healthy than they have been in years past, I think the Rangers win this division going away. But can we bet on that? Is that something that we're willing to put our chips on the table, saying that DeGrom and Seager will be healthy all year? And it's a question we don't have answers to until we see it play out in the field. I like the additions here. Jake Berger bolstering the lineup and Jock Peterson. I like
Jock Peterson. Love it.
The utility nature of these players, about where they can be slotted as well. Of course, Jake Berger is going to be playing first, but we've seen Jock do a lot of different things on his role in the field, not just on the field, but just like his role on the team, whether it needs to be a leader, a glue guy. Jock Peterson has played a lot of meaningful games. And I think he's going to be one of those guys we look back and be like, that was a pretty big signing for the Texas Rangers. But ultimately they're committed to contending. They're committed to, again, being more of that 2023 team. They easily could have because again, house money. I mean, there's something about winning your first ever World Series, franchise altering type of moment for them. But they look at this and say, you know what, we want to build on what we did. And I honestly don't think last year was a reason for them to back off of what they did. I think everything that could have went wrong, it was a Murphy's Law type of year, and they go in strong, a stronger team that they were. And again, Wyatt Langford has me really excited, and watching even their prospect system, and maybe a year from Evan Carter. I mean, you could throw him into the injury concern bucket as well, but if all things go well, man, this is a very exciting team. At the very least, as a baseball fan, I think it's a lot of fun to watch them be constructed and watch them night in, night out, and hopefully mash the hell out of the ball. I mean, that's what we want to see from this lineup.
And don't forget Bruce Bochy's every other year record kind of thing. Like, you could say it doesn't mean anything, but maybe it does. Maybe the way he manages these teams. It's an every other year kind of thing. I loved them bringing back Nate Eovaldi. For some reason, I just didn't think he was going to be back in Texas, and I think that protects them a little bit. If DeGrom, something happens again, at least you still have that veteran presence at the top of the rotation. It'll be interesting to see what they get out of Jack Leiter and maybe Kumar Rocker at some point in the season. It looked like Rocker was having more success last year, right? And then Leiter always seems to struggle at the major league level. Spring, it's reversed. Kumar Rocker's been getting absolutely rocked, which pretty much assures that he will not start in the rotation. They want to save his innings a little bit anyway. And Jack Leiter's looked great. And we gave you that stat on the Sandler episode, I believe, where it's something like if he's hitting 98, 99 in his fastball, he's an unbelievable pitcher. But when he's hitting 97, 96, he gets crushed. So we'll see what we get out of Jack Leiter. They might end up needing the dude in a big spot at some point. I want to talk about the Athletics next, the A's, and just the A's, no location. And to be honest, maybe you feel differently, but I really want to just focus on the product of the field. We can talk about the ballpark because it's related to the performance, but all the other stuff I think is personally for another conversation. And there is one that I'm sure we'll get into at some point, probably early in the season. The A's are fun, man. I think they're fun this year. I think the offense is the bright spot on the team. I mean, you got a guy like Brent Rooker. Can he do it again? That's the question there. Can he do it again? Lawrence Butler, everyone's singing this guy's praises, just got extended. They very excited about him. Shea Langoliers as well, JJ Bleday. Like, they have some offense to speak of. And I think that'll be fun to see how that goes. The pitching staff, I like that they obviously Luis Severino, after what he did with the Mets, more power to him, getting a big deal out of them. And I like the A's being aggressive in that manner. Trading for Jeffrey Springs, I really like that as well. The rest of the rotation is a little bit, there's questions there of whether it's going to be good enough to kind of keep them afloat. Bullpen, same kind of thing. So the biggest question to me is what Sutter Health Park does to the team. Does it end up being a positive for them because they learn how to use it? Similar to in the NL West episode, you talked about Coors Field, and there is a way for the Rockies to be able to mold a good team in the manner of that ballpark. So do the A's learn how to use that ballpark and that heat to their advantage, or does it wear on them? It's one thing to come in there and play 3 games and be worn down by the heat for a couple days, but you're playing there half of your games. Are you worn down a little bit? Are the pitchers worn down a little bit by those conditions? Are there more soft tissue injuries because of the dehydration concerns? Maybe field conditions. Remember, this is not a major league ballpark. I know they've been working on it. So that's what I'm looking for with the A's. But at the very least, I think they're fun. I think they're fun this year.
Yeah, and we're going to see a 3-year stint kick off this year, and they're going to have to adapt because this is not a quick lily pad to Vegas. They have them. I don't think shovels on the ground in Vegas yet. You can put a patch on the jerseys and act like it's happening, but we're seeing renderings and their future is very much in question. And I will continue to say that as well as they transition from Oakland and all the bullshit that went on with that. And like you said, we're going to keep that simply for another episode because we could spend 45, 50 minutes just discussing that. Lawrence Butler and Brent Rooker being extended. We saw, as you mentioned, Rooker earning his first Silver Slugger last year, and what he did turn into a feared hitter. That lineup itself has been certainly a revelation. And looking at what they did, giving out the biggest contract in franchise history to Luis Severino, whether that is deserved of that player, it just shows that there is a movement in a direction to invest in the product on the field. And it sucks. It took them moving from Oakland and leaving the Oakland Coliseum and the fan base there for it to actually happen. But they're addressing some immediate needs. I think they recognize there is something in place where they're developing players offensively, at least, that they're able to get the best out of. You mentioned Shea Langoliers and Lawrence Butler, but this Tyler Soderstrom is another player. Like, I feel like he could be the next player to take the jump that we saw from Brooker and Butler. There was moments that we saw him do that. There's a vibe to this squad here that they're going to be overcoming, that they're facing a lot of adversity. And I'm sure there's some excitement about what the future holds if everything comes out to play of like, oh, the bright lights of Vegas. But let's be clear. I mean, there's a lot of adversity that this team together have to overcome together if they're going to be around this run together for 3 years in Sacramento, playing under the heat in a minor league ballpark that holds 14,000 fans. And there's a lot to be desired about the accommodations that are being made there. And it's not just it's 6 months or like they're going to do some renovate. This is a 3-year stint that if these players are going to grow together, it could definitely galvanize them on this road to being a cemented core that this offensive team can be something you build around. And again, it has to be managed appropriately, but this has a way to bring this team together where you may be looking at the Brent Rookers. Obviously they intend him to be here, and Lawrence Butler and Shea Langoliers. There's a core of 4 or 5 guys that like we're bringing them to Vegas with us. We're packing them in the bag and they're going to be with us. And I think that's the intention. And if you would have said that in 2023, we couldn't recognize those players. And that happened pretty much just in a 365-day calendar, that all of a sudden offensively, the outlook is pretty damn positive as far as offensive go with the Athletics, and more coming on the way. And I think if you could build a factory of this offensive production and bringing the best out of players and fixing swings, I don't know, the sky's the limit. I mean, they can hopefully do it with pitchers down the line, but if they become a factory for offense, we haven't seen a lot of teams be able to master that. I'm not saying they've mastered it yet because it's only a short sample size, but there's something to that. We've seen a lot of these teams become fancying themselves fixing pitchers. We haven't really seen a lot of teams fixing swings on batters and being a reclamation place where they bring the best out of it. So if that's going to be their identity, it's a damn good one to corner.
Yeah, and I guess you got to give them a little credit because they were quoted basically months ago as saying like we're going to start ramping up our spending in like preparation for eventually getting to Vegas. And we kind of all scoffed at that. But they've kind of done what they said they've done. Not only did they sign a Severino, but they also locked up a couple of their guys that we mentioned in Rooker and Butler. So you kind of have to, I'm not going to say take them at their word because I don't think we're there yet. But you have to give them a little tip of the hat there because they have done some of what they said they will do. Another couple guys, you mentioned future, Nick Kurtz, Wake Forest guy. This dude is a monster. Hit like a 430 or 440 foot home run in spring training the other day. An absolute bomb. I don't know when he gets here, but guys get here faster now, not just the A's, all around the league. So maybe we see him at some point playing some kind of DH role, or if Soderstrom is not doing as well at first base, take first base. Jacob Wilson's a guy I love. I'm excited about watching a full season of this. Luis Arias type of bat to ball skills, right? Will put the ball in play constantly. The knock on him was that he's just not going to have any pop, and he's had a little bit of pop in spring training, so he might be pushing that aside. If he does have like any bit of pop, this guy's going to be a hell of a player. He came up last year and looked exactly like the guy that was described, just putting the bat on the ball constantly, and then had a hamstring injury, and that kind of took him down almost for the rest of the year. I think he got a little bit of play at the end, but I'm excited to see him. And obviously Mason Miller at the back end of the bullpen. I know I mentioned the bullpen as a possible question mark. I'm more so talking about getting the ball to Mason Miller, who's doing that in between the starters and Mason Miller. But getting to watch another season of Mason Miller is always fun. So that's the A's. The last team we have to touch upon here, and they've been an active team, is the Angels. So the Angels, to me, some of the same questions still linger. They made a lot of moves, but they were kind of like around the edges type of moves. Like, let's get a Travis d'Arnaud. He can be our backup catcher to Logan O'Hoppe. Don't get me wrong. I love that. I love that combination. I think that could be a really cool combination, to be honest. Yusei Kikuchi, they gave a good amount of money to be, and he's kind of got to be the ace. And that's a question. The guy we saw in Houston when he was acquired by the Astros was fantastic. Can he be that same guy in Los Angeles for the Angels? I think he's going to need to be. So they were active, but I still look at their team and I think offensively, if they're healthy, and that's a big if, you need Mike Trout, right? You need Zach Neto to get back, hopefully by May, from the surgery he underwent on his shoulder, I believe, or labrum. Yeah, labrum. So they're going to need those guys to lead the way. Even if the offense is healthy, the rotation still just looks so questionable to me. I just don't know if they'll get enough. We've been saying Reed Detmers needs to take the next step for 2 years now, and he still every year is this guy that looks brilliant one day, 13 Ks, and then struggles for like a month, ends up getting sent down. Like, I still haven't figured out who this dude is. So to me, back end of the bullpen, Ben Joyce, electric. Now you got Kenley Jansen there to kind of help him along and maybe, take the saves for now, but then hand it over. So I think there's something to be said. You like the back end of the bullpen. I just don't look at the rotation and see a team that could earn a playoff spot. That's my what jumps off the page is the rotation.
It's more than fair, especially with the history here. I think the team does have the central figure of Mike Trout, no matter what they do, whether he's on the field or not. Everyone will discuss Mike Trout, his legacy. What does it mean? They did add Jorge Soler as well in the middle of that lineup, and
yeah, I like
that's
that.
something that we can look at as well. But with Trout's recent injury struggles and the team's reliance on, let's be honest, aging veterans are raising some concerns, both in the rotation and also in the lineup as well. There's some good young players. You mentioned O'Hoppe, but the acquisition of Yohan Moncada as well is just like, okay, well, they had to do that obviously with Anthony Rendon and all the drama there. There's a lot of negative press with Anaheim, or Los Angeles Angels, Anaheim, whatever you want to call them. And they have a lot of reclamation to do to get that, because it's been nothing but, just negative vibes out on that franchise for quite some time at this point. And I think the biggest deodorant for the stink could be Mike Trout having a Mike Trout season. And I think if we watch Mike Trout go out there and just be the dude, he did that for a while. And I understand it did not reap a lot of playoff existence. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was one playoff appearance in total against the Kansas City Royals. And that was all we saw from them. But even in the down years, people were still excited to go out to the ballpark and see Mike Trout. Or you turn on a game on MLB TV and watch Mike Trout. So if he's out there playing and he's healthy, that could just be enough for us to just kind of swallow this and be a team that we want to watch. Because I think that's the biggest damnation on this team, is that they have been unwatchable. It's not even like a product that they're a team that, they're just a bad team, but there's brights. But like, they're just overall, without Mike Trout on that team, there's really no storylines to even kind of invest yourself in. But at the end of the day, and when we were doing our offseason interview, offseason episodes, I should say, they were the first team to make a move. They were aggressive. They wanted to be jumping in. They wanted to improve this team. But those additions, that being said, do not sufficiently address their longstanding issues, because you mentioned the pitching, you mentioned the depth. The issues are going to be the same this year. There's a strategy to it, and heading veterans without a clear long-term plan are not going to yield the desired results of what we're looking for. There might be a stopgap for some of this stuff to stop the bleeding, if you will, because they'll be a better team than they were last year. But what is the long-term trajectory of this franchise? What do we envision to 2028 Los Angeles Angels and Anaheim being? And I don't know if anyone, same thing with the Rockies. And we went off on that in the episode as well. Like, what is the vision of what this team looks like post Mike Trout, when you want to give him his flowers, retire his number, all that goes down. The good grace is done with that. What is this team? And like, that's the frustrating part about watching them continue on this slide of mediocrity and below that.
Here's what I'll say to try to be positive here. I do like the makeup of the core, the attitude of the core. You have Ron Washington as manager. I really like that. I think not much bad to say about Ron Washington as a manager. If you have the trio of Mike Trout, Zach Neto, and Logan O'Hoppe healthy all year, I mean, Neto was going to take a little bit to get back because he's starting out, but those three for the majority of the year, the makeup of those guys, the leadership of those guys that I believe they have, I think could help this team overachieve. So that's what I'm looking for. And all three of them have dealt with their own injuries. Even O'Hoppe has had some injury issues in his first couple of years in the bigs. But if those three guys can get on the field at the same time frequently, I think they could overachieve. The rotation's still a question. Yusei Kikuchi, I mentioned his time in Houston, 60 innings, 2.7 ERA, 0.93 whip. They need that guy. They need that Kikuchi. Christian Moore is also an interesting story. Drafted last year out of Tennessee. Started tearing it up and just moving from level to level. They even thought he might get called up before the last season ended. He didn't. The Angels are synonymous with calling guys up fast. Quickly, I want to add Ben Joyce to that core too, because I do think he's a core piece, and I do like the makeup of Ben Joyce as well to add to those other three dudes. It'll be interesting to see if Christian Moore is up here as well. So there's things to like, but they've never, even when there's been things to like for the Angels, they've never seemed to mold together into one team. It's just like different entities. Like, oh, I kind of like that player. I like that player. Oh, they're weak here. It's just never been. It's never felt like a full team that you can assess. It seems like different pieces, some good, some not so good. It just hasn't molded together. Maybe this is the year, Ron Washington's second year, where he has that vision in mind and he's going to put it together. I don't know. That's my thought on the Angels. Do you have anything to add before we get to our actual predictions here?
Just to reiterate what you said, I think you put it perfectly. I think that there is no DNA on this team. If you look at I guess the most potent Angels that we remember, the David Eckstein championship type of teams that we watched, Torrey Hunter out there, and they had an identity of who they were. And maybe I'm just partial to it because, they used to beat the hell out of the Yankees, and like watching them on a close basis, like they were difficult to play, and going to that ballpark was a haunted house of madness for the New York Yankees. And I'm sure it was the same for some of the division rivals, but it feels like you said, they're just a bunch of players put together without a purpose and putting pieces together without sort of the puzzle pieces making sense. And like you said, Ron Washington has only had a short term there, and this will be his emergence into putting his fingerprints on this team, good, bad, or indifferent. It should have an identity and be molded into something to find who they are as a team. And I guess looking forward, anything's better than where they were, because it's been some down times in Anaheim. And first and foremost, as a baseball fan, let's just get Mike Trout on the field and keep him healthy. Like, I don't know how we do this, but as a team, can we, do some rain dances and good voodoo, whatever it takes to get this dude in the field, or just trade him too. Like, by the way, that's the other thing that we continue to say, find a different home for him. I want to see Mike Trout go out with an absolute firework of the next 2 years, like 3 years, whatever it takes. I'm not putting him off the field because I know he's still out there doing this thing. People forget how electric he is, and he's amazing for baseball. Everyone wants to move on to the next stars. I'm not ready to move on from Mike Trout. I'm not.
No, I don't think anyone is. I mean, how cool would it be to get to like August, September, and we're watching a meaningful AL West game with Jacob deGrom pitching to Mike Trout? I think that's the vision we want to see. Just quickly, before we get to our predictions, I meant to mention trade deadline stuff. We alluded to it a little bit there, but my predictions for the trade deadline for this division, I would say the Rangers probably bolster the bullpen in some way. I think if the Astros are far enough out of the division lead, maybe Framber Valdez is an obvious trade candidate to get, restock that minor league system a little bit. But again, I do think if they're in it, they hold on to them. And I see a world where if the Mariners are not in the division lead and not close enough sniffing it, maybe they trade away Randy Arozarena. I could see that as well. But to get to my predictions for the actual division, I have the Texas Rangers winning it. They're my division crown here. I have the Astros finishing second, and I went back and forth. I had the Mariners in that spot, and then I thought about what I said with, can they really get as lucky or fortunate with the rotation health? And I thought of George Kirby already being hurt. So I put the Astros in there second. I think that's going to be close. Mariners third. A's 4th, and the Angels 5th. Interestingly enough, I think this is going to be a one team in the playoffs division. I think the Rangers win it and make the playoffs. I don't think anyone else comes out of it.
So I am going to have a differing opinion on here. I have the Mariners winning this division just for the sake of hopefulness. I want to see the next step from Randy. I want to see Julio be who he was. I think they finished first in this division. And I also have the Rangers finishing second. And I have both those teams making the playoffs. But I do have a surprise here. I have the Athletics finishing above the Astros. And I think that they're going to finish with more wins than the Astros. And spoiler alert, I was ripping on the Angels. They are my last place team as well. So I think the Athletics take a huge jump this year. They're not going to make a playoff run, but I think them playing in that ballpark, them grooving as a team, I think that they will be better than the Astros. And I think we can officially put the shovel in the ground and bury the Astros for good for now, until this new core emerges and Isaac Paredes starts having a reign of terror on every other team. But the Astros that everyone knew from 2017, we can put the epitaph for 2024. That run is now over.
All right. That's a big, bold prediction there. So to wrap it up, we'll give our X factor, one or two guys for the whole division, who impacts the division the most. This is going to be an interesting one for me because when I put out the little video on X and Instagram of my AL West X factors for each team, I picked Corey Seager for the Rangers as their X factor, and I believe in that. But for the division, for what's going to affect who wins the division the most, I think Jacob deGrom is the overall X factor, and I'll tell you why. It's more than just the innings he's going to give and the guys he's going to strike out. I just think it changes the entire mindset and look and feel and intimidation factor of the Texas Rangers. I think if he's not there, I think their confidence changes, and I think everyone going in there to play against him, the attitude changes about who the Texas Rangers are and who that opponent is. So I just think it's yes, it's on the field, but there's also a mental aspect of this. If Jacob deGrom does not end up being there for the full season, I think it changes everything.
So with the spirit of who I picked as my division winner, my X factor is Julio Rodríguez. And I think Julio is going to play a huge role in this division race and the American League at large. I think for the Mariners to do what they have to do with the rotation the way it is, we heaped all the praise on it. If this offense is going to be sustained by one player, I feel like it has to be Randy Arozarena, but it has to be an MVP level Julio Rodríguez. And I hope we get that from him this year. And I think we will.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, Julio, yeah, that's an X factor for sure. I hope he balls out this year.
So again, we appreciate you guys jumping aboard. This is the second of the two. So if you're jumping in on episode 68, you're like, hey, what happened? What about the National League West? Hop back to episode 67 and check it out, because we are on this ride talking about all the divisions, previewing stuff all the way into the Tokyo series through next week. I mean, because believe it or not, we are 9 days away as we record from the Tokyo series with the Cubs and the Dodgers and kicking off the season. I know it's like 2 weeks prior and it's always confusing for people, but at the same time, we're getting ready for meaningful baseball, Devin. A lot of conversation is going to be talking about stuff that's on the field. It's no longer hypothetical. It's no longer conjecture. It's about tangible results on the field. And that's just exciting to me.
I mean, I'm excited too. I'm trying to contain it. And if you're listening to this episode and it's Tuesday, and you listen to the NL West one on Monday, don't get too comfortable here. We're going to continue. NL Central will come out on Wednesday. AL Central comes out on Thursday. Then we'll take a very short break. And next Monday and Tuesday, you'll have the NL East and AL East previews as well. And eventually after that, we're going to put one together where we actually talk about predictions of the playoff bracket, who is going to come through it, and the awards as well, as far as Rookie of the Year, MVP, Cy Young, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and so we already have it slotted for Wednesday, dropping 3/19 for the MLB prediction special. We're going to be touching on the Tokyo series, the MVP, Cy Young playoff predictions for all the year, and kind of mash everything together. So 2 weeks, 6 divisions, the Tokyo series conversation and bold predictions. We're giving you guys all those things to kick off the season in the right way, and definitely want to start the season off with a boom. And we are probably at the very least going to give you 1 episode a week, but there will be weeks we give you 2. I think we found a nice rhythm when we had guests on, where we do the guest and we also do another episode as well without the splitting them up. Because I think in the early episodes, we would bake all of them together with the guest, and it just became a lot to consume. And based on the feedback, I think people like interviews that are probably around an hour, episodes itself that are around the same. We don't want them to bridge. Of course, some of our episodes are an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes, but I think what we're doing on this one, we intended to go 30 minutes for each, but of course you guys know us,
like 35,
45, 50 minutes, etc. But
there's a
we
lot
want
to
to give
talk
you,
about in this division. So
yeah, we did sprint through a lot of it too. So like I think if we would have went long form and sipped on a little whiskey on ice here, we would have been here for 3 hours just talking about the Mariners. That's how we do here. And again, we appreciate all the support that you guys are giving us here. I want to give a shout out to a shout out that we got on this show because it was very, very meaningful to me because one of the things that they had said, and I want to get his name right because it's definitely something that honestly was what we're looking for. You know what I mean? Like you and I have got into this. We were looking for the conversation of how do we get new people to listen to the show and have a conversation with us and how it'll be taken, especially from a New York Yankee fan and New York Met fan. And we had our good friend at Hucky Corp, HUCKY Corp, the Dugout Dispatch. He had said, quote, "I can't wait for this. These guys do a great job being objective. I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Check out the Tablesetters pod if you got time, or check them out if you don't have time. It's worth it." So that's the highest praise we can get. We appreciate everything from that. And go check out the Dugout Dispatch as well. Follow them on Twitter. Engage with them as well. Everything they do is high quality. And baseball's reciprocal. We want to make sure everyone's enjoying what everyone's doing and having a conversation about the best game on earth.
Yeah, and don't worry if you're thinking that you want us to get back to some college baseball stuff too. We haven't forgotten about that. We're paying attention. Right now, it's just MLB. I know college conference play is starting here. MLB is going to take a little bit of shine right now with the season creeping so close with some big injuries happening. We got to get these division previews in. And then once we get back to our regular episodes, we're going to be pushing everything in there as much as we can.
So we will be back tomorrow talking, as Devin said, the NL Central, and then approaching the end of the week, getting you guys through your work week with an AL Central preview. So 4 episodes in 1 week, 6 division previews in 2 weeks. A lot of great content coming your way. You guys can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at Tablesetters Pod. If you're going to purchase something you want to buy a gift for somebody, go to Dugout Mugs and purchase something. Use code TS10 at checkout, save 10%. It helps get the word out for us and also supports a good vendor over there supplying really good products. Buy a bottle opener, one of those bats that you can use as a mug when the season starts. Watch some college baseball with it as well. Whatever you want to do. And again, leave a 5-star review if you can do that as well. If you like what we're doing here and you have some engagement on our end, of course, reach out to us, send us a message on Instagram, on Twitter, mention us as well. Or again, leave us a 5-star review and tell your friends about it. That's the biggest way to get other people to find our content and continue to engage with us.
Yeah, tell your friends.
So we'll be back tomorrow. And we will talk to you after a while.